any chance I get, I go back to my script before we start shooting. So I literally know it inside out, back to front.
So today's session is almost everything you'd like to know about the script supervisor role. I'm really delighted today to welcome both Jane Jackson and Sylvia Parker, who are really highly experienced script supervisors with 20 years experience each of working in the industry. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes with Jane and Sylvia talking about the role of a script supervisor, demystifying the role, and our focus today is very much across the roles, the responsibilities, and how they work with the teams, as opposed to a session which might cover how we're all going to go back into production. So without further ado, let me hand over to Jane and Sylvia, who are going to lead today's session.
I think we're going to start just discussing a little bit about what actually the role is. It's something that we get asked quite a lot. And Sylvia has a really lovely little piece on this. Thank you, Sylvia.
Yeah, a writer that I worked with, a screenwriter, he sort of described how he saw our role. It's a very long quote, so I'm going to cut it short. Basically, what he said was, everyone knows what a script supervisor is supposed to do on the technical level. The script supervisor is the institutional memory of the story as it must be. When everyone else is myopically focusing on buttons and lenses and strands of hair and the motion of a cloud across the sky, the script supervisor is the only one focusing on all those, as well as the actual movie that is being made. Which I think kind of sums up what we do. It's all, I think the clue to what we do is in our title. It's all about the script.
Yes, definitely. Supervising the script is the key thing. The script comes down to absolutely every aspect of our job. And every script is different, which also makes our job really quite fascinating from job to job. And sometimes you're working with just one script, and sometimes you're working with multiple scripts, which can add different challenges. But there really is no difference between the job when you're doing a film, working on a film, or in high-end television. It's literally just the number of scripts, I think. Would you agree with that, Sylvia?
Absolutely, yeah.
It is one of those questions that comes up quite a bit, but no difference at all.
And also, just add something, we're also called continuity. It's exactly the same thing. I know people get confused with the two titles. I get asked a lot, what's the difference between continuity and script supervision? There isn't, it's the same job.
Yes, I mean, continuity is actually part of script supervision, but in some ways it's actually quite a small part of our really quite involving job. I think maybe if we sort of start at the very beginning of our involvement in a project, usually the very first thing that we're asked to do is to do timings, pre-timings, which can be done even months sometimes before a production can get going. Sometimes it's much closer to the production, and it's very important actually with timings to really visualize what you're reading as opposed to just reading the script. And timings can have a huge impact on the schedule and all sorts of things. Is that, Sylvia? I believe you visualize, and also sometimes you'll walk around when you're timing.
Yeah, we all time things differently. For me, what works is actually acting it out. I do that at home. It gives me a good sense of the pacing of a script, which is really important. And also when we have read-throughs or table reads, I can get an idea from that, and then I can go home and do my timing, because I know the speed of the actors and everything. So yeah, there's different ways of doing it, but like Jane just said, just reading it is not going to give you any idea of a script's timing. And also it depends on the script as well. If, say, for instance, you have a period drama, you're going to time that differently because the language is different, it's much slower. If you've got a contemporary urban drama where you've got maybe young people who are speaking slang at a really fast pace, you would time that differently. So again, it's going back to the script, what sort of script you've got, that's how you deal with the timings. I don't know if you agree with that, Jane?
Yes, yes, I do. I mean, there are all sorts of things that can, well, I mean, fight scenes I find particularly difficult to time. It's often quite a big block of stage directions, but it can go by so quickly. You know, some fights can take days to film, and yet you're talking about, you know, 12 seconds, if that. And that's I think that comes with experience, really. You just have to do a lot of them in order to know how they, which obviously doesn't help somebody doing one for the first time. So stage directions can be difficult. Dialogue tends to be much easier to time. And especially when you've worked with actors before, it can be great. I also like going on records, actually, in prep. That can give you a huge help, looking at distances and things, and that can, but of course that doesn't really help if you're doing a timing way in advance, because the records haven't even been planned yet. And I often go over a script multiple times. You can get into the flow, I find, towards the end of a script, so I have to go back to the beginning in order to carry that forward. It's a really enjoyable part of the job, I find, doing the timings.
It is. You learn a lot from doing the timing, and also, like you were saying about fight scenes and things, it's very hard to gauge the real timing of that. So what I tend to do also is speak to the director and say, look, how long do you think you want for this? And they'll give you an idea as well. They'll say, oh, I don't want it longer than a minute. I don't want longer than whatever. Because I think time is really, really hard to do. And it really is a case of experience. You just learn as you go along, really. Yeah.
Yes. And the other thing that the timings are very important is when you're actually filming, is to then gauge how much over or under the actual program or film is actually running. It's something that every day our progress report will give over and under estimated timing. And it's really for producers to actually use that to see if they're on the right track. Obviously, if something's getting shorter, it's much more of a concern than if something's getting longer. And things always spread. They very rarely contract and get shorter. So the timings are useful throughout the entire production, even down to the post-production, actually the edit at the end. Sometimes the slot is actually very important, but it's useful thing.
Very. Then after timings, I guess we move on to breakdowns, really, don't we? I mean, how do you think about breaking down a script?
Yes, and breakdowns, I find actually doing the breakdown is possibly the most exciting thing about the job, in a way, in prep. It's picking apart the script and working out every single thing you can is a really, it's great to really understand every scene and every implication that every scene has for the whole story. I try and treat every script very differently. I usually do my breakdown with a spreadsheet program, and I tend not to use previous templates. I tend to build it from scratch because every script will have its own little nuances that you need to keep track on. And you never really quite know what they are until you start really understanding the script. And your breakdown is used so extensively during the shoot that it's a good opportunity to get it really right during prep. You can't come back to it during the shoot very often.
It's basically the Bible, if you know, that's the way I look at it anyway. And so what I do when I first start the script is to sort of break down the story days, because you have a script and you can have story day 1 and day 2, and it may actually be about a year's difference between those scenes. So it's very important to actually get what the length of the time-wise, how the script times out, because every department will ask you that. Art department want to know how many days have gone since scene 1 and since scene 16 or whatever. So that's really important. It's actually breaking down the script scene by scene into story days. So that's basically what we do at the beginning, isn't it? Is just get those story days right.
Yes, yes, and of course, if something takes place over a very short length of time, like one day, timings can I don't mean timings as in script timings, but the time of day can then become very critical. I mean, it's sort of simpler in a way when there's a lot of time spread out between the scenes. But when there's just moments, literally between the scenes, then there will be a lot of questions about that. I sometimes also produce a calendar. You probably do that as well, do you, Sylvia? Sometimes, if it's relevant, then there'll be a calendar with months, and it can be particularly useful if wounds are, fights. Maybe somebody gets a black eye, and it's important to work with makeup and to actually track when it will first appear and then how it progresses through. So there are lots of elements to keep track on. In a breakdown. And
like you were saying, if you've got, say, like it's one day, but there is different, you may start off morning, afternoon. Is another thing you need to check with costumes. They might want to change. They might want to change one of their artists. So yeah, we really communicate with makeup, costume, art department, every department that you can think of. And they all share our breakdown. They all have their own, they do their own costume and makeup breakdown. But ours is sort of like the master plan, really. Everybody sees that.
And there can also be things in the script that aren't actually on screen, but we still need to know. I mean, some scripts are full of active questions where, for example, a character may be looking at a photograph. Now, the character knows what that photograph is, but the viewer doesn't. And these are things that then get explained later, but it's important that we flag these things up throughout, because the actor will need the right photograph when you're filming the scene. And some scripts can be incredibly complicated in that respect. And your breakdown is it's that critical opportunity you have to make sure that you have all the answers at hand on a very busy set. Where you don't have time to flick through script pages and things. It's and writers often do a similar exercise. I often find that writers love looking at my breakdowns when they come onto set, because they then tell me that their office wall will be full of exactly the same things that I've actually flagged up. So do you find that, Sylvia?
Definitely, yeah.
But it's important that we pick it apart in order to put it back together again, I think.
Yep. So that's breaking down the script scene by scene. So we've done our timings, done the breakdown, and then what do we move on to? What's important for you?
In prep, there will be meetings that are the production meeting can be useful. The read-through can be probably more critical for us in a way. It's as we've discussed, it's a great opportunity to hear the dialogue. And other meetings, like say records, if we can, they can be incredibly useful to go on to in prep. And then we have our own meetings with all the other departments to discuss any particular things that we need to, costume is one main thing I always find. With the costume supervisor, there will be lots of things to make sure that we're on the same page. And then time also with the director in prep.
Yes, definitely. Because you also need to know how they're going to shoot things. If they usually tell you at that time if there's things they want you to watch out for, things they want you to remind them about. It is really, really important. I always have some time with my director before I start shooting. Yeah.
And then should we move on to the shoot?
The shoot day, yes. When it all comes together, we hope. Yeah.
A typical day on the life of a film set for a script supervisor.
Yeah, we usually kind of start where I would normally come in, say we had a call time of 8 o'clock. I'd be there by 7. Usual thing, having breakfast, whatever, speaking to people. And then I'll be on set by 7:30 because you're usually starting to block through by then. So there'll be a blocking session it's usually just with the director, the actors, the first AD, the DP, and ourselves. maybe one of the props people, if there are a lot of props involved. And it's just basically just marking out the scene that we're going to shoot. Going through things, running through lines with the actors. That for me, that's how my day usually starts. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Jane.
Yes, that's the same as me, and it's and those blocking sort of rehearsal sessions are so useful. You get a feel for what the shots will be. Some directors will even give you a shot list.
If you're lucky.
most sort of don't. But during the rehearsal or blocking, you get a feel for what the shots will be. And I mean, I suppose it's, I hate saying usually, but you tend to start with wides and then go tighter and tighter. And of course, we are always looking at our script, reading every stage direction again and again and again, just checking and double checking that we're not missing anything, really.
Because also the blocking is sometimes where the script gets changed a bit. Actors may feel, oh, this doesn't quite work, and they'll try something else. So the script does tend to change at that point. That happens quite a lot. So when you actually have the full rehearsal where everybody else comes in, then that will be the script, and it's sort of set in stone by then. Yeah.
Yes, and it's also that blocking is also our opportunity to gently remind directors, or this is where you'll get asked the questions, where is a character just come from, you know, and screen direction can be important, you know, what's the scene before, where are they going to, you have to be ready with all the questions that you know are going to be asked.
And the ones that you don't know are going to be asked.
Yes, and we can, I mean, I'm sure you do this as well, Sylvia, but I always, you know, the night before, I always spend at least half an hour looking to the next day on set. I want to know, I want to have all these questions answered in my head. I make all sorts of notes about what the scenes are, and I want to have everything ready. And of course, you'll get thrown every now and again, but they are the blocking rehearsals are wonderful things to be at, and useful. And then usually say that it's a crew show where everybody will pile in and watch the rehearsal again. And then maybe the actors go off and lighting starts. And this is all very dependent on how, you know, the first AD and the director you know, are running the show, the floor, I think. Is that?
Just had a question, Jane. Someone's asked, why is blocking called blocking? I'll let you answer that one.
I think you've just asked a really interesting question that two rather experienced script supervisors are unable to answer.
There you go. Just please, we don't know everything. I honestly, I'm going to be totally honest, hold up my hand. I do not know why it's called blocking. It's just what I'm used to be calling it. It's basically what it is. It's blocked out with the camera, where the camera is going to go, where it's going to move, where the actors are going to move. The camera crew will set marks for the actors. I think that's basically why it's called blocking, because you're blocking off all these different aspects. So yeah, it's really a technical rehearsal. That's what it is. It's so that everyone moves at the right time. The grip can get to understand where the actors are going to be when they say this line or whatever. It's just a very technical rehearsal, is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And now Amy has a question. Usually everybody gets an opportunity to see the crew rehearsal. I mean, I think it depends on the spaces involved. Some departments will, I mean, some of the larger departments may have representatives. I mean, often the costume designer, for instance, will be there to see the first rehearsal. So usually as many people as possible, depending on the size of the location?
It is usually an HETV rehearsal. Like if there's a limited space, they will just have one person from each department there. If there's a bigger space, then they will, you know, most people get to see the rehearsal. Yeah, whoever needs to see the rehearsal will be there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for something like the sound department, where you might have 2 booms and a sound recorder, it's vital that they all see it. So it's you know, it depends. Usually everybody.
So yeah, so that's basically it. Yeah, we block, then we will do the rehearsal. The actors will go off, get changed, get made up, and then the lighting will happen. In that time, I am again going over my script. You know, I also to my trainees know the script inside out, back to front, and any opportunity I get, I go back to the script all the time, because you just want to be prepared. Like Jane said earlier, you really want to be prepared for any questions that come up. And if you get asked by a director, you know, can you tell me such and such? You don't want to be flicking through hundreds of pages. You want to be able to just go right there. So I'm always, any chance I get, I go back to my script before we start shooting. So I literally know it inside out, back to front.
Yeah.
Then we start shooting, which is the exciting bit. And there we are, so we are really multitasking. We are listening to every single bit of dialogue that's being said, making sure that the actors have got all their lines correct. We are prompting them if they don't remember their lines. We are making notes for the editor, which we'll go into as we go along. We're basically making a note of everything that happens in that shot. Like Jane says, we should start with a wide shot. So, you know, we'd write down something like wide shot of so-and-so and so-and-so, and then we take down every single detail. And then we will go into a closer shot. That's when we have to do what we call matching, which is matching the actors' actions to what they did in the wider shot. If somebody gets up on a certain line, we need to make sure they do that for the tighter shots. That is really important, because these are cutting points for the editor. And if we mess up, they can't cut stuff together. Jane, what do you think? Yeah,
and that's another. I mean, during the rehearsal, the blocking, you're making so many notes. I mean, obviously things will change from the rehearsal, and also things will change from wide shots, which can get really interesting. But that's always going to happen. Things don't necessarily work in a tighter shot that they did in a wide shot. But it's also important that you know, or try and know, when the editor will use a particular shot. Because some things may not matter, but some things are critical to give them a point that the person, for example, does stand up in exactly the same place. They can't stand up twice in the edit. So, and these are all things that you can, I mean, directors are sometimes very helpful about telling you when they're going to cut to a particular shot. Often they don't, often they don't necessarily know. But it's our job to be very aware and to point things out that we feel could be a problem.
Yeah. For instance, say if you have a scene where you have a lot of people sat around the table and you do a big wide shot, you wouldn't be too worried too much about their actions, because you know that very little of that shot's going to be used. If someone is speaking, the director's going to want to use the tighter shots in them. So you can, I mean, you're still doing your job. You're still making sure that people's actions, you know, are fairly matched. But you don't have to be. It doesn't have to be an exact science. Once you get to the closer shots, then you want things to match. Yes. So yeah, that's basically what we start doing in our notes. We just try to have everything as perfect as possible. Just watching things with our eyes. Trying not to use playback. I don't tend to use playback a lot. I don't know about you, Jane. Do you use playback much?
It sort of depends. I like to be on set with a sight line to an actor or to the actors. I think it's really important that they know that I'm there for them, and that they can just glance at me if they need a little prompt. I don't want to be around a corner somewhere that they can't. It's you know, prompting actors and helping actors is something you have to be very gentle and discreet with them. You don't want to throw them off. It's important not to get in the way of what the director's actually saying to them. So you have to be very discreet, and also you have to know when not to say something, which is actually as important as actually saying something. And of course, I always try and go through the director first. It's a director may not want you to mention something.
Yeah, someone's just asked, actually, which kind of ties in a bit with this. How do you go about tracking everything? It's just because basically we're superhuman, really. How do you track everything? What I tend to do is I prioritize things. What is important? What is really being seen in the shot? And that's what I try and focus on. It's impossible to watch every single thing that is happening. Nobody can do it. But you look at a shot and you see what is the most important thing. What is the story conveying, etc. And you focus on that, and everything else you'll see will fall into place. There's, because sometimes a director will use bits from different takes. There may not be a perfect take that they like. So if an actor doesn't match something perfectly, it's fine. He'll take it from another take. He or she, sorry, will take it from another take. So it's a thing of experience. You tend to know what's important and what to focus on and what your director wants and what the editor's looking for. So yeah, that's how I'd answer that. And also the good point you made about talking to actors. It's a very subtle thing, and you really have to know when to go in and tell them something and when to just leave it. And I know there's times when an actor hasn't matched their actions, but it's been such a good take that I don't want to say anything. So I will just mention it offhand to the director, mark it in the edit notes, and they can deal with it. But a lot of the times, yeah, it's more about script supervision than it is about continuity. Sometimes you can let the continuity go because the actor's given such a great performance, and that is what everyone will watch. And if they're sort of picking up on some minor continuity error, then something's not right there. So yeah, that's you try to get everything, as I said, as perfect as you can. But the thing is that sometimes you just have to let go because it was a good take. Other than that.
Yes, and some actors want more help than others.
Yeah.
I mean, some actors are absolutely fantastic at continuity, and others aren't. But it really doesn't matter in the end. Sometimes it's always quite surprising. But we're there for them, and we're there to give them as much help as they want, and to do it in a way that is not at all distracting.
Yeah.
I think it's very important. It can be a very intense environment on set, especially in some very emotional scenes. It's important to read. You have to be very sensitive and quiet, and not say too much. I think.
Oh, there's a great question here, actually. I've got to answer this. How do you deal with directors and DPs who say continuity is not important?
That is an interesting one. Well, of course, sometimes they're right.
They are. And I'm going to give it a good example. We were talking earlier about fight scenes. Now, fight scenes, okay, they're well choreographed by brilliant stunt guys, okay? And the thing is, I think once you've actually established the geography of the area that the fight's taking place in, after that, I don't think it matters about continuity, because there's so much going on and you can cut from very strange angles, whatever, and it will work because it's a fight scene. It needs to be messy. It can't be really well choreographed. And so continuity sometimes just does not matter there. It really doesn't in really big fight scenes. I did, I think, Hollow Crown, this TV drama, where we had 4 fight scenes. As it was to do with the Wars of the Roses. And we had 4 fight scenes, and one was in a river. How on earth can you maintain continuity there? You can't. So there are times when you just have to let things go. It's not always important. And again, experience will tell you what is important and what isn't. Yeah. But, anybody says to you, oh no, it has to be 100% all the time. I'm sorry, I don't go along with that. And that hasn't been my experience. You have to, you have to compromise sometimes, I think.
Yes, yes, and of course, no director wants someone telling them that something won't cut. I mean,
Oh no.
Directors spend a lot more time in the cutting room than we do, and it's the performance that is the key. I mean, I write down very detailed notes about the takes, what's happened in each take, and I want to give the editor as much information about what the director thought about the take. We're in an incredibly privileged position, I feel, that we can hear the notes the director gives to the actors, I think, and then we can. I mean, it's wonderful to see how directors can manipulate performances sometimes and actually eke out what exactly they're looking for. And editors often like to know what the director's looking for in the takes. I tend not to give huge, great, big, short descriptions because I don't really have time, and editors always tell me that it's the information about specific takes that is far more important to them. And that's also what directors appreciate you actually doing. You're actually passing on what they're looking for, and that can really help the editor.
And then also, you often get a director will actually give you specific notes to actually give to the editor. Will say, look, can you ask them to cut here, to go to this shot here, and they will give you really detailed notes. And that's way, way more important because they're thinking about how they're going to cut things together when they get to the edit suite. So yes. Yeah, that is important.
And of course, we do get all the departments coming to us. Makeup can get very concerned about a strand of hair that falls down, and it's their job to be concerned about that. They're thinking about their department and their work. It's a very creative role, the makeup design, and so we do need to be there for them as well. And if we can fix it, if there is another take and there is the opportunity to go in, then it's great. So. I mean, directors can sometimes not be, not really want to, or they may not see a strand of hair that comes out. Sometimes we can, and I mean, editors sometimes don't even notice it when the performances are so great. So we do get all sorts of questions from every department, really, lots of departments, whilst we're actually filming, and we're also maybe sort of shielding the director in a way from all these little tiny things. I mean, it goes back to the quote that Sylvia, the introduction that Sylvia gave. We're looking at everything. We're looking at the tiny little details along with the actual overall, essence of the scenes and things.
Yeah, another thing, again, we're talking about departments because, as everyone knows, filmmaking is a collaboration between all departments. And, we talk about makeup, obviously, and hair and costume, but also we work really closely with the grip and the camera department. Grips, when they're moving the dolly, they want to know at what point an actor got up. They want to know what line it is so they can get their timing right. Again, the camera operator will ask you a lot of things as well. He will say, when does so-and-so do such and such? So we're always having questions fielded towards us because we are watching the overall picture.
Yeah.
So it's important that we have these answers for all the departments, and that's what we're doing as we're taking our notes and being general superwomen all the time. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, a boom op will, if a line is added or if a couple of words are cut from a line, it's really important that the boom op knows, because they're waiting to swing the boom between actors, and it's really helpful for them to know something that we might know from the rehearsal or whatever, or a director's just said, I'm just going to cut that line. So we must filter that down, otherwise it can, it's not right for a boom op to be left sort of with the boom in the wrong place.
Yeah,
we need to help them, and I find it interesting that with trainees, it doesn't take them many days before they come up to you and say, look, I had no idea how many questions you get from every department. And I find that quite interesting, because I don't always know these days how many questions I get. We just answer them, don't we?
Yeah. Just got a question there. How do you cope with 2 or more cameras? We just work twice as hard, basically, yeah. How do you cope with 2 or more cameras?
Yeah, I mean, it can depend how they're being used. Sometimes it's really useful to have 2 or more cameras. And in fact, I mean, how often do we work with just 1 camera these days?
Very rare, actually. It's a bit of a luxury, yeah. And it's usually if you're in a really small set, you can't have more than 1 camera. But otherwise, it's generally 2 cameras at least.
Yeah. Yeah.
It really is the norm, and you just check what the shots are, and you just keep an eye on everything the way that you just normally do. It's not something I really think about. It's that is just the nature of the job for me.
Yeah, it can be. I personally, I don't like looking at a monitor with 2 different cameras on it. I prefer to actually look at rather not use the monitor and just look at the scene unfold in front of my eyes. But what is important is that we need to know that everything is covered. And this is where I find that the operators can be really useful. And sometimes B camera will be doing something on different, every take will be different for B camera. And they can be roaming around, but just going up to the camera operator and letting them tell you what they've actually got. It could be a little detail of a hand, picking something up, but you know the scene or the editor will need to tell the story of the scene. And of course we need to tell the director if we think that there's a shot missing. Directors don't necessarily want to hear you when they think they've completed it, and you. I think we need to know.
Yeah. It is actually. I do find that with multiple cameras, you do have to really check. I think you have to probably check even more because, as you say, you don't always know what the other cameras are covering because they can be roving cameras. And so, yeah, it is really good to go up and have a chat with the camera operator and say, did you cover this line here? Because we don't always know. So yeah, it's just been a bit more diligent, I think, when you've got more than 1 camera, you really do. Because I think a lot of people think, oh, it's multiple cameras, that's it, we're covered. It's not always the case. And you do, yeah, I think it's up to us to double check that the director has got all their shots, yeah.
Sometimes 2 cameras can be used to get a close-up and a tighter close-up of the same character, which I think is a really useful way of using 2 cameras. You get them on a very similar line, and it means that actors can they don't have to repeat emotional performances too often. That's a simpler way of using 2 cameras for us. Often they're pointing at completely different things.
Or what you sometimes get with multi-cameras, you actually get cameras that actually get in the way of each other and just end up shooting each other.
Yes.
Which is very helpful, yeah.
Or another thing is that sometimes they can both start looking at exactly the same thing because that's the interesting part of the scene.
Yeah, but just the answer to the question is you just become more diligent really, and just make sure that the scene is covered with all the shots that you need, yeah.
Have you worked with films that are CGI heavy, and how do you approach the breakdown for them?
Good question, really good question. Because what you have, I've worked with films that are CGI heavy. And what you can sometimes have is a scene where which is a bit of CGI, partly live action, partly animation, whatever. So you have this one scene which you never seem to finish because there's so many different components to it. And the CGI one, because obviously it's usually done at the end. So I just tend to mark off the bits that have been shot and then make a list of all these CGI shots that need to be done to actually complete this scene. It's another bit of work. It's something again that I go through in prep. I kind of separate all the CGI stuff so I know what's coming. I don't know how you handle it. Do you same thing in prep? Do you have it in your breakdown, all the CGI stuff?
Yes, I mean it does depend on the production. I try and talk to the visual effects people, obviously in prep. Often you have a visual effects supervisor there with you on set all the time, and you can liaise. There are things that visual effects people need in order to do their CGI work. I mean, I find it nowadays really that they tend to take their own notes far more than there was a stage a few years ago where we were expected to do take an awful lot of information for them. I don't, you know, things like sort of angles, camera angles, height, so many different details that can really take quite a lot of time.
And there's now they tend to have a data wrangler on set who does all that. You know, you double check with them sometimes about camera details, but there is usually somebody who does all that stuff, and it's just liaising with them, really, isn't it? They do most of the work.
It is. I mean, there can be something that you can often have multiple elements that go into a particular CGI shot. So it's not, I'd say that it's not really our job to ensure that all those elements are, I mean, I like to keep an eye on them, I think. But it's yet another thing to really spend time in prep, looking at properly and understanding what the CGI element to the show is.
Yeah. There's another question that's come up actually, which is a good one, is about watching rushes. I mean, I don't know about you. I tend to try and watch rushes all the time. I mean, most rushes now, we get sent them over the internet, and we watch them that way at home. I try at the end of a very long day to watch the rushes from the day before. I tend to also spend a lot of time with the editors when I can. I go and see stuff that they've cut together, just to make sure that everything is cutting together, because something that we didn't mention, which we should have mentioned at the beginning, is that everything is shot out of continuity. You very rarely shoot in continuity. And you may be shooting part of a scene at a certain location, and then about 2 months later, you'll shoot the rest of that scene in the studio. And it all has to match and look as though it was all shot at the same time. So I tend, you know, if we shot a bit of a scene 2 months before, I will go into the edit suite and ask them to play me back stuff that they've cut together, which is actually better than watching the rushes, because then I know what shots have actually been used in the cut. So yeah, that's what I do. I try and spend a lot of time with the editors, and I'm always in conversation with them, and especially to see if anything's missing. That's really important. You want to do that as you're going along rather than right at the end of the shoot. So rushes, yeah, I do watch them, but I also spend a lot of time in the edit suite, which I think is very, very important.
Yes, I like to have a lot of contact with the edit throughout the entire shoot. It's very useful. I'm talking about scenes that get split. Sometimes scenes are scheduled to be split. Sometimes it's a known thing that you'll split scenes, but every now and again a scene will only get half shot. I remember shooting one scene where two actors got into a taxi in one particular location, and then there was a taxi journey, and then they got out of the taxi, and it was actually shot over 3 different locations, in fact 3 different countries.
Yeah.
And the journey took about, I mean, in screen time it took about 1.5 minutes, and yet it was in fact it was also different continents involved. And you never know what's really going to happen to a scene. And of course it looks completely seamless, the end result, which I was really quite surprised about.
I know, I get that as well, because I remember doing a scene with an actress where she walked down some stairs, walked down a corridor, walked through a door, and it was in like 4 different locations. So we started off, I think, filming at a cathedral, I think it's Winchester Cathedral, where we walked down the stairs, and it ended up in the studio about 2 months later. And you're just so worried about it. There's so many elements of that, and then you see the cutting. Oh, thank God, it all cuts together seamlessly. But yeah, that is one of those worries, isn't it?
Yes, it really is extraordinary how. I mean, even, you know, when you have to pick up a close up against green screen or something, just to plonk into it. I mean, it can be terrifying. I have to admit. And then you say it, or you call the editor just to sort of check and say, well, what are you talking? You know, yeah, no, it's fine. It's
Really?
Smoke and mirrors can be. It is a fascinating part of the job, actually. What you can actually get away with. But of course, it's all completely planned out. Nothing is. It's not chance. It's all very carefully considered, even if it's challenging.
Someone has just asked, do you make notes on background? Yes, I do. But I work in conjunction with our brilliant ADs on set, who really have their eyes on that. And again, it's that whole collaboration thing, work together. make sure, and also if I'm lucky enough to have an assistant, she will keep an eye on that as well. So yeah, you do. Background is really important, because I've seen things where you'll have somebody crossing twice in a scene or something, so you need to watch out and things like that. It is important.
I have a sort of trick where I note the crosses by the dialogue. Just I don't really care who it is. I just want to know that someone crosses.
Yeah, that is it. It is important, because otherwise it just confuses people. It confuses the whole geography. If they've seen someone walk past and they go, "Hey, hold on," they've already gone past. Why are they going past again? So yeah, definitely watch out for that.
I think we're just looking at the time. It's whizzed past a bit.
Yeah, oh my god.
I think we wanted to leave some time for the questions, didn't we?
Oh, there's somebody who's asking about notes. Digital or paper? I do mine digitally. I do everything digitally. I have an iPad, and that's what I work off. I do have a paper script. That's a personal thing. I know some people don't. I love to have a paper script. My director is usually always looking at my script, and will want, sort of maybe during a take we'll be flicking through it and things. Actors want to see it as well. So I have that basically for them. But everything else, I make my notes digitally. Everything is sent at the end of the day. It's all uploaded to a program which other people can log into as well. It is most people are digital now because the whole system is digital. Jane?
Yes, my last production, I worked exclusively off the iPad. I intended to have a paper script as well, but we started off shooting in Nepal, and it's quite windy up in the Himalayas. So I quickly realized that the iPad was going to be much easier. And to be honest, I never really went back to the paper script, but my trainee had a paper script, which was very useful to refer to if we needed that. But there's no real difference. There are so many wonderful programs that we have, new tools really with apps for the iPad that my system has transferred incredibly easily actually to working with an iPad on set.
Yeah. Asking what software I use. What software do I use? I use, for my templates, I tend to use Word. It just works for me, and I devise my own templates from Word. And then we do a thing called a marked up script. Most of you probably know what that is, but I'll just quickly run through it. The marked up script is the script that we hand over to the editor, and we draw very, very strange things on it. We draw lines and wiggly lines, which basically tells the editor what the shots are, where they start, where they finish. And you can do that by hand. You can do it with a pencil and a ruler. I have a program which I use. It's just an annotation program. I use Goodreader. Jane, I think you use GoodNotes, don't you, to do yours? So people use so many different things. There are lots of things out there. All I would say about it is there's no particular software you have to use. It's whatever suits you. But at the end of the day, it should not govern how you do the job. It should not take the sort of software you should not take over how you use the job. You still need to actually use your eyes and use your mind, and the basic tools of being a script supervisor. The software just helps you out. It's time saving and whatever. So that's what I use. Yeah, I use Goodreader and Word, and that's it really. What else do you use, Jane?
I use Peter Scarrett template.
Oh, sorry, I use Peter Scarrett as well for my report. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
That's for the daily progress report. He's done templates based on a FileMaker Pro database system, and they are incredibly useful for keeping track of running times. That's a great one. I use Excel quite extensively with my breakdowns. I also use Word and the GoodNotes. But I think every PDF annotation app is pretty similar.
Yeah. Right, here's the question that we get asked a lot. How do you become a trainee? Right, we probably do things differently. I'll just explain. I get a lot of people who write to me asking to come and be a trainee. The first thing I want to know is that you actually want to be a script supervisor. If somebody wants to start off as a script supervisor to get to somewhere else, I'm probably not going to be that interested. I really want you to be able to, to know that you want to do the job. And it's not really that sort of, you can't really sort of like just come in and start really and then go on to something else. It's quite a long, slow process. And so if you've done something like you've done some student films on your own as continuity or something like that, something that showed me that you really, really were interested in doing it, then I would be interested, yeah. That's basically how I got most of my trainees. They started off by doing student films, helping out other people on films, and sort of like built up a little CV. Then they come join me. I train them as much as I can, and then they go on to be assistants, and basically that's how it is, really. Jane?
Yes, and I've been involved with the ScreenSkills trainees, Script Supervisors Association trainees scheme. ScreenSkills very kindly gave us, got involved in getting script supervisor trainees on set in HETV programs, and it's to actually get on-set experience as a trainee has been fantastic. It is something that has been, I think lacking. I mean, how do you can only get really so far, and being able to work with a script supervisor on set on a real live job is a great way to learn. And you can also be a huge help to the script supervisor. And with the high-end TV shows, every department has increased over the 20 years or so that I've been doing it. But we've remained slightly solitary. Now it is beginning to change. I think even in television, more assistants are working with script supervisors. And trainees can be invaluable. There are so many things that they can learn on the job, whilst actually helping the script supervisor. I don't believe that it's actually a one-person job anymore. We've touched on the two cameras, the visual effects. Our job is huge, and it really helps to have somebody else with you.
Yeah, it does, definitely. It helps to have a second pair of eyes, especially if we're dealing with something with an actor. You might have to go off and run lines with an actor. To have someone else there watching other things is really, really helpful. Yeah, definitely.
Yes, and you can ask them to look at very specific things during a shot, can't you? You can say, look, help me out here, and just look at this, and then it means that we can actually look at everything else that we need to look at.
Yeah, especially if you've got, which has probably happened to you. You might have a scene where an actor's having problems with a certain scene, and they really want you to be on it, and they're sort of like looking at you off screen to give them help. So if you have your assistant watching something else that's going on, so if you keep your eye on that, then I can just concentrate on this particular actor, whatever. So yeah, it's so useful having someone on set. We're not always lucky enough to have somebody. I'm lucky on the bigger films. I've been really lucky and have had somebody, and it's a great help. And it's like Jane said, it's the best way to learn. You can do courses. There are some courses, and I'm not gonna say don't do them. They're useful, but the best way is to actually be on set doing the job is the best way to learn. It's the way I learn. Yeah.
I think a course is actually a very good way of learning more about the job.
Yeah.
And I think I think a 5-day course is much better than just a 2-day course.
Yeah.
You're not going to learn everything in 5 days, and you're certainly not going to learn everything in 2 days. But it can, if you're not quite sure what the job involves, then I would say that's always a really good first step. And like Sylvia, actually, I want my trainees to really want to be a script supervisor. And there are an awful lot of them out there that do want to become script supervisors.
Yeah, I've got to answer this question that's been there a long time. So I'm a DP. What do you wish DPs knew about continuity, and how can they help us? I mean, we help each other. I was at the DPs that I work with. They may ask me to watch out for certain things. They may ask me certain questions, especially like when we're doing things like camera setups, and they want to repeat a shot like we did like 10 weeks ago. we have all the details and stuff. Yeah, it's again, it's the whole collaboration thing.
Yeah.
We tend to help each other, don't we?
Yes, and of course, you know, DOPs are incredibly concerned about lighting continuity.
Yeah.
That we tend not to get too involved with, although they may ask us. They could ask us, for instance, what time of day did we shoot a scene that we're then picking up a shot from? That might be, or the lighting, you know, was the sun out or whatever, you know, we can help them with that. So, I mean, so continuity for them is lighting continuity is vital, you know, for them, and that they will be thinking a lot about that. But I do think that they help us out.
They do.
As much as we help them out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's again collaboration. That's what it is.
Yeah. There is one actually that I would like to go way back to.
What's that?
Okay. Well, it was actually about blocking, and it's when we were both slightly thrown about.
Somebody did answer that. Somebody who worked in the theatre told us that what it comes from is that they used to put wooden blocks there for the marks. So there we go. I've learned something.
Yes,
just
so have I.
that we do not know everything. That's the thing you should take away from this, that we're not all knowing. We're still learning as we go along.
Yes, so thank you for the person. Sorry I didn't get your name. That was really, really helpful.
Thank you for that, because I did not know that. But yeah, just to sort of like wrap things up. The thing that I love about the job is that no job is the same, no director is the same, they don't work in the same way. And it is always a learning process. I mean, I've been doing the job for 20 years and I'm still learning how things are done and how things are not done. It's just as important. It's just a great learning process. And that's why I love doing the job. Yeah, every job is different.
Yeah. And it's you know, the scripts are so exciting as well these days. We get some great, fantastic writers working, and it's a privilege actually to be working with some of the scripts that we do.
Yeah, it's a great job. It's a great job to do. Yeah.
So Sylvia, Jane, thank you so much for spending the time today to talk to us about the role. I mean, I've learned so much today, and I think everybody else has as well, right through from pre-production into shoot, into edit, all the things that we really, you know, need to look at. And I think so many people absolutely take for granted. They don't realise, you know, what's really going on in the background, and the responsibility, the weight of the responsibility that is on a one-person team. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today. It's been absolutely brilliant.